What's up, tiny people? It's good to be back with you again. So, I apologize. I wanted to record that first story about Minty, Harriet Tubman, part one, but I got a little busy, so I ended up putting up a video, somebody else teaching that first story. You already know this, but you are learning about the Civil War. There's nothing civil about the war. A civil war is when a country's people are fighting against themselves or the government. In this series in CKLA, you're going to learn about the American Civil War or the U.S. Civil War, when the north part of the United States fought against the southern part of the United States. And there's several important people in here. You have Ulysses S. Grant, you have Abraham Lincoln, Harriet Tubman. You're going to learn all about the Civil War. This is part two of Harriet Tubman. Now, Harriet Tubman is really famous. They even made a movie about her, and there's lots of books. You can hear about her and how she freed slaves from the South and brought them to the North where they could be free. And today's lesson, first thing is you are going to need to know a few words for the story. So let's take a look at these words. The first word is conductor. Now, since this Underground Railroad was like a secret passage that people took, they talked about it like it was a railroad line, and they called the person that led the group through this secret system of paths and trails a conductor. So you can see right here, a conductor is a person who led or directed enslaved Africans to freedom during the Civil War using the Underground Railroad. The next word is contributions. Contributions are money, materials, information, or labor given to someone to help others. A gourd. A gourd is a plant whose hard-shelled fruit is sometimes dried and hollowed out to be used as a tool. If you've ever seen like a soup ladle is like a big old scooper that you use to scoop out soup and pour it in your bowl. Well, there was sometimes a big old ladle like that you would use to dip into the water and then drink water from a big pitcher way back in old times. And that's what they use to drink water. It's also the shape of the stars in the northern hemisphere, in the northern part of the sky. When you're looking up and you see the North Star, you can see the ladle, the handle of a drinking gourd. And so that's where the story followed the drinking gourd, or that's where the song comes from. Passengers, that's the dipper, the Big Dipper. You'll look up and you see the Big Dipper, and it'll point to the North Star. Passengers are enslaved Africans who traveled to freedom on the Underground Railroad. And rebellious, you guys should know what this means. Rebellious means resisting or fighting. Being controlled by someone else. Example, because John would not stay in his room, his parents told him he was being rebellious. So I'm going to take myself off of the picture here, and we're going to start reading chapter 2 of Harriet Tubman and the U.S. Civil War. I went a little bit far here. We're going to zoom back. Chapter 2, Part 1. The summer air was hot and heavy. There was no breeze to cut the heat, and the shade of the scraggly bushes did little to block the blazing sun. Gnats, mosquitoes, and flies swarmed all around, buzzing and biting. Despite the heat and bugs, the runaway slaves, filthy from head to toe, their clothes tattered and shredded by thorns and branches, their bare feet blistered and cut, slept hard, huddled together in the tall grass. As they slept, a woman, a conductor, watched and guarded over them. Even now, as they slept deeply in the bushes, this woman sat upright and alert, her sharp eyes scanning the forest and her ears listening for signs of danger. She knew the dangers all too well, slave catchers were always searching for runaway slaves, lurking in the middle of swamps, hunting for runaways miles away from the nearest house, town, or road, hoping to catch groups of runaway slaves. The slave catchers were paid great sums of money if they caught runaway slaves, and this woman knew very well that the slave catchers would never give up. This woman who stand guard over everyone else was Minty, the same Minty who used to sit by the crib hoping that the plantation owner's baby would not cry. But people did not call her Minty anymore. They now called her Harriet Tubman. When she grew up, Harriet Tubman did not serve in the big house. Perhaps this was because the plantation owners sensed that she was a bit rebellious. She always did things her way. So, from the time she was a young woman, she was sent to work in the fields, plowing and digging, cutting hay and tobacco, and chopping wood. In time, she became as strong and tough as a person could be. When the plantation owner died, Harriet Tubman faced a new danger. It was likely that she would be sent off to Georgia like her sisters. Georgia was in the deep South where many of the plantations grew cotton and the conditions were even worse for enslaved Africans. Work on cotton plantations was difficult and performed in all types of weather. They plowed the fields with teams of mules, hoed the soil to get rid of weeds, and harvested cotton by hand. The cotton had to be picked clean and then made into heavy bales that could be transported from the plantation and sold. Harriet knew that she had to run away from her life of slavery. In order to reach freedom, Harriet needed to use the Underground Railroad. This was not a real railroad. It was a system of secret routes and hiding places that helped enslaved people escape from slavery in the South and to freedom in the North. If only there had been a real railroad to freedom, then escaping would have been easy for Harriet Tubman and other runaway slaves. They could have hopped aboard any train and ridden away from the punishments, endless work, and sorrows of harsh life. In certain ways, the Underground Railroad was like a real railroad. On the real train, there were passengers and people who travel from one place to another. Runaway slaves on the Underground Railroad were always also known as passengers, and as soon as they ran away from the plantation, they set off on an incredible and difficult journey to freedom. But runaways could not complete this journey without the help of a conductor. On a real railroad, a conductor is in charge of the train. On the Underground Railroad, a conductor guided runaway slaves, leading them through secret paths and taking them to safe houses. These safe houses were known as stations, like a real train station. They were places where passengers could rest before moving on to the next part of their journey. Many different people provided these stations to escaping slaves, people from both the North and the South who knew slavery was wrong. Even some former enslaved Africans who had won their freedom and wanted to help others. Harriet Tubman made it safely to freedom in the North using the Underground Railroad. Enslaved Africans like Harriet were free in the northern states like Pennsylvania, where slavery was not allowed, but they weren't entirely safe until they left the United States and entered the land north of the United States. This was because laws allowed slave catchers to enter free states in the North to catch runaway slaves and return them to a life of slavery in the South. Harriet did not stay in Pennsylvania for long. She missed her family and friends and could not bear the thought of them remaining in slavery while she enjoyed a free new life. She decided that she had important contributions to make and to help those who were still enslaved. So she became a conductor on the Underground Railroad and returned to the South 19 more times over several years, risking her life each time to help other enslaved Africans escape to freedom. Harriet Tubman soon became one of the bravest and most famous conductors on the Underground Railroad. Her name became well known among the supporters of slavery. Plantation owners put rich rewards out for her capture. Within a few years, they wanted her stopped at all costs, but she kept going back again and again, helping more and more slaves escape. Harriet was startled by the distant sound of barking dogs, and she knew danger was near. "Wake up now! Wake up!" she urged, shaking the men and women. Gather up these babies. We've got to get a move on." The men and women sprang to their feet with fear and panic. "Don't you worry now," she assured them. "I know a station not too far from here, but we'll have to move fast, and we'll have to stay in the creek to keep those dogs off the trail." They hustled out of the swamp and splashed up the creek, where the dogs have a hard time following their scent. The runaway slaves hid in the weeds while Harriet Tubman slipped through the yard and into the front porch. She tapped 3 times on the door and waited a moment, then tapped 2 more times. This was a secret knock, and the people in the house would know their visitor was an Underground Railroad conductor and in need of help. A white woman opened the door. She signaled for the runaways to follow her into the chicken coop. There, she lifted a trap door in the floor and then revealed a dark hole. "It's not comfortable," she told them, "but nobody will find you here. And I have a few stew biscuits inside some fresh milk. I'll bring it out as soon as the coast is clear." Their hearts raced as they waited in their hideout, expecting to hear the slave catchers' dogs barking any minute. But the dogs never came. Running through the creek had thrown the slave catchers off the trail for now. The runaways were safe. They wanted to sleep, but when the sun went down, they had to move once again. There was no time to waste, for nighttime was the only safe time to travel. Lost my page. Outside, Harriet Tubman looked up at the starry sky. She put her arm around one of the children. "See there," she said, pointing upward. "That group of stars up there, it kind of looks like the ladle you might use to scoop water from a bucket. Back where I'm from, we used to call it the drinking gourd." "Do you see it?" "I think so," the child said. "Now you see the cup of the drinking gourd?" Harriet Tubman asked. "Look at the 2 stars at the end of the cup and pretend to draw a straight line from those 2 stars straight out to space. If you follow that straight line out, you will find the North Star. It is always right there in the same spot, and you can always find it if you know how to find the drinking gourd in the sky." "Do you know why that star is so important?" "Why?" the child asked. "Because the North Star is always to the north. If we follow the North Star every night and keep it in front of us, then it will guide us north to freedom. I'm heading to the north and to freedom exactly." That's exactly what they did.